Hi there, welcome to today's video. In this video, we'll be looking into the list in C#. This is the continuation of the C# beginner series, and previously we had talked about arrays in C#. So the list in C# is a dynamic collection that allows you to store elements of any data type. Now, the biggest difference between the list and array is that for an array, we need to know beforehand the number of items that are going to be stored within an array. So, like for example, an array will have maybe 5 items, and when you want to declare the array, you have to have told it that there will be 5 items only in this array. But a list, unlike the array, allows you to take in dynamic amounts, so it can grow and can reduce. So that is the nature of the list in C#. Let's look at an example. So here we have where we stop from the arrays, but what we are trying to do now is for a list. So how we set up a list is we just do new and then the type we want. So for example, string. So what this means is I could put in any amount of items I want without specifying. So for example, if you look here, you see that I didn't specify anywhere the length of this list, and so I could just say list.add, and I say I want to add let's say is a string, let's say boy. Let me add another item, let's say girl, and that's it. So let me say I want to console log this, so I will just use the for int I less than so now when you are working with lists, my advice is always to use something like this, that because for example we don't know how many items will be in the list at a particular time, because because it's dynamic, so it could have added several amounts and we are not sure. So for list, it's usually advisable to use the dot count. What this dot count does is it gets the total number of items within that particular list. And you see, if I come here and I say console.writeLine and list of index I, what we will see here is that it will console log for us the first item and the second item. So if we run this now, so we see here that it shows boy and girl just as we had put down. So you see boy and girl, and that's what was in our list. Now also there is another way you could set up your list. So like as an array, you could just say new list string, and then you could, the same way you do that, so you could say baby, so the same way we did with an array. Basically, it's the same way we could also create a list. But unlike an array, when you do this, it will tell the array that will be the permanent size for it. In the list, it just sets this as the first 2 items there. So if I come here, or let's say, so let me change this to new list, just to new list, and I'm also adding new list here, and let's just make this new list here. Just so what we are having here is, you will see the first item will be baby, the second will be baby, the third will be boy, and the last item there will be girl. So let's console log run that and see what our console will show us. And you see it shows baby, boy, and girl. So unlike an array, when you declare like this, you have told it that is the permanent size. Here with a list, what it just does, it starts it with those 2 items, or whatever number of items you start initialize it with. So that is how the list works. And with a list, you could add to the list and you could remove from the list. So for example, I could come here and say new list dot, I could remove from the list. And what do I want to do? Let's say I want to remove let's say girl, or let me say I want to remove baby. So let's say I want to remove this, and let's say, so we have removed it, and let's now run it and see what we have. You see, we have baby, we have boy, and we have girl. We no longer have baby because we have removed it from the list. So you see, a list can grow in size and can shrink. It's not static like an array where when you define it, it will always have those amount of items. Now, you also remember that we could items in array, we could get the item in a particular index using this approach in array, which we have also just seen in a list that we could do the same thing. So, but you could say that, okay, we have added 1, 2, 3, 4. So even though I've removed this, maybe it means it will still be 4 indexes that are there. It will not. It works with the number of items that are currently there. So by the time it is 1, 2, 3, 4, as of this point, there are 4 items. So it has index 0 to index 3. Or when it comes here and it removes baby, what happens is that it has a count of 3 and has the index of 0, 1, and 2. So if I come here now, here, and I say new list, and I say index 3 is equals to new item, and we run this, we are going to get an error because we no longer have an item in index 3. So if I came here and I say new list index 3 and I say new girl and we run this now, what you find out that there is no error at that first point. Yes, so you see at this point we didn't have an error because what it just did is it saw index 0, 1, 2, and 3 being the girl, and it just update girl to new girl. So if I remove this now and we run this again, so I just refresh it, you see that it updated the last item, which was index 3 as of this point, to new girl, and after that it removed baby and there was no problem. But because after removing baby there will only be 3 items, and meaning there is no index 3 anymore, if I try to access that index, it will not exist and it will throw an error. So these are things you need to also note with the list, that the list can be, you can get items within a list just like the way you get the items within an array using the indexes. So index 0 to whatever the length of the item is, we could get and access them directly. So this is the list, and the major difference, as we've shown, between the list and the array is that for a list can grow and shrink in size, but an array is a fixed size. So if you know the size of what you want to work with, an array will be good. But if you don't know, you could then a list will be much more beneficial for you. But before we go, I just want to say that for a list also, you could also tell it the amount of space you want initially. So for example, here I could come here and put 5, and what this does, it tells this list that there will be 5 items within this list. So if I just come here, let me just make this, or okay, yes, let me just make this index 0 and put something there, and index 1, index 2, index 3, and index 4. So we have these 4 indexes. So if we run this now, you'll see it will throw an error, and the reason why it will throw the error is because even though we've told it that there will be a space that we want to start with is 5, but we have no item actually within it. So even though the space exists, it has created a space in the memory that will accommodate 5 strings, but yet because it doesn't know, or rather because no item has been put into the list, it's still going to be empty. And so if you try to access any item in any index, it will throw you the error because the index is out of range. So that's something you should note, that even when you tell it the specific size that you want to work with, it doesn't go ahead to put items for you there, and it doesn't mean that any item exists there. So you cannot access any index that has not been added, and for an item that has not been added. This is something very important. So this is how the list works. But one thing I will say before we close up is that each time you are adding to your list, the implication of adding to your list is that when you create a list, it creates an arbitrary amount of items, a space, for example, in memory. That, okay, let's say maybe it starts with a space of 4, and then you put in 4 items, and then you want to put in the 5th item. It checks and sees, oh, I only created initially a space of 4. It will now go and create a bigger space, maybe double it, and make it maybe space for 8. But that will be taking memory processing, and that is one of the biggest drawbacks of the list compared to an array. So you find an array is much more efficient because it knows the number of items and that doesn't change, whereas a list keeps changing and means that in memory you change the location from time to time, which can affect a bit performance. It's not very significant, but it's something you should just note. So this basically is the list in C#. If you have any question, please drop it in the comment section. But before we go, I want to give us an exercise to try out. I will not actually solve this, but if you did try it and you are facing issues, you could just drop a comment and we'll look at it. Probably we'll do a video for that. So what I want is, previously we have worked with our calculator to the point where we are now taking the number of items through an array. So I want you to change it to a list, because we are making it compulsory for the user to put in 5 inputs. What if the user just wants to put in 2 inputs? What if he wants to put in 3 inputs? It doesn't need to put 5 inputs. And what if the user wants to put more than 5 inputs? We don't give them that flexibility. So we want to change it to a list where you can keep adding the number of numbers you want till the required amount you've gotten. So that is the exercise I want us to try and work on. Let's work on it. I encourage us to try and do it ourselves. Let's look at and brainstorm how we can solve this using the list to do this. I hope we're able to come up with a good solution. And if you want me to go through it, or possibly you could probably drop a link to your repo, or for me to look at it, or you could just drop a snapshot of your solution in the comment section and we'll look at it and see from there. Thank you, and I'll see us again in the next video.